The jaws of Cetus, plotting course. Compromised, you say? Celestia asked, shifting in the command chair of her flagship as she communed with Johnson on Rynn's world. Yes. Johnson replied. Several of my scouting forces have encountered resistance and, more importantly, taken casualties in battle against Cetus. Some have been unrecoverable, and if my research into these beasts is correct, they may be able to glean information from the memories of those slain they consume. These scouts, were they privy to your grand strategy? She did not mean to sound callous, but such was the discussion that it could not be helped. No. All were of low rank and knew of nothing more than the basics of the campaign. Johnson frowned. However, they did all hold one important piece of information, your presence. My location is secure, Celestia said. The Tyranids would expend far more resources than they could gain by attacking me here. Even if they don't, it is doubtless that they will just sit idle while you continue to allow reinforcements to break through their shadow. Already the Psykers under my command are reporting difficulties in using their powers or focusing on the Astronomicon. Now it was Celestia's turn to frown. Perhaps you are correct in this fear, she said finally, resting her chin on her knuckle. You must knock out those nodes quickly, Johnson, before the Tyranids cut you off completely from my reach. We do what we can. Johnson said, pausing. Although, there is always the chance that you might be able to further assist our operations if you were closer to Rynn's world. Out of the question. Celestia said, her voice harsh. If we overcommit our forces now, the entire crusade could be sacrificed in a fruitless battle the hive mind might be able to shake off. Worse, there is no guarantee that I will not be stifled by the shadow, even with the difficulty that provides. I have seen you destroy suns with but a flick of the wrist, Johnson countered. Do you really fear mere insects? No, Celestia replied, removing her hand from her chin. But I have no illusions about my own strength, and it is not as considerable as some would say. You sell yourself short, Empress. Johnson said. Old age and inactivity have made you overly cautious. I will not question your final decision, but understand that the survival of Rynn's world will depend on your final strike, whether sooner or later. There is no need to lecture me, Johnson. Celestia said, giving a sigh. I will consider all our options, then I will act. In the meantime, continue the operations against those nodes. By your command. With that, Celestia released her hold on the Psyker she had used as her speaker, her vision returning to the command deck of her flagship. Her attendants stepped up to her side, Celestia standing and straightening out her uniform before speaking. I will be in my quarters, she said, accepting a cup of water from one servant. Do not disturb me unless it is an issue of utmost importance. I shall return when it is time to move to the next point. Her servants bowed in reverence, only looking up once Celestia and her companions had left the bridge. She continued in silence, gently sipping from the water as she walked, mulling over what the lion had said. Have I become soft? She thought. True, I have not slaughtered worlds as I had before, but I do remain here in relative isolation, but then there is a time and a place for direct action, and now is not that time. She finished her water by the time she reached her quarters, stepping inside while the custodes took up guard positions. She crossed to the far end of the room, finding a clear spot to sit down and meditate. Crossing her legs and folding her hands in her lap, Celestia closed her eyes and cast her soul into the void. The Imperium was calm, for a broad definition. What reforms she had made were starting to take root, at least within the segmentum solar, and the forge worlds within had responded to her order to improve with relative success. Still, there were holdouts that would have to be remedied once the crusade had run its course and she could govern directly once more. Once Guilliman and Fukin are returned to me, then we will have the strength to win this war. Her vision shifted towards the Eye of Terror. The damned scar on the galaxy provided nothing to her but a twisting cloud of chaos, whispers of dead kings and lusting daemons drifting into her mind. Celestia ignored them, as she always did, searching deeper for any sign of those sons that were lost, those that betrayed her millennia ago. None. That was concerning. Celestia recalled her soul from the eye, drifting back towards the shadow that enveloped Rynn's world. Thanks to Johnson's attacks and her own might, she could still sense with beneath the constant roar of the hive mind, a flickering light tossed about by a roiling sea. Millions of souls waiting for her, fighting and dying to buy future generations mere seconds more of life. "Do not fear, my subjects," she said. "I am coming soon, but I need more time." "What are you?" The question shattered Celestia's focus like a vase dashed to the ground. She doubled her psychic defenses as she drew back, ready to face this new threat. The entity that stared at her was massive, incomprehensible. Billions of minds, billions of mouths, all calling together in one purpose, to kill and feed. Celestia could sense as their presence, their intelligence, sank further and further into oblivion, a vast organism shifting and hunting for anything of interest, anything it could absorb into itself. A lesser psyker would have died instantly at the sheer wrongness of what Celestia saw. Even the strongest Astaroth's psykers would be helpless against the vast might that was the hive mind. Celestia was no mere psyker. "What are you?" the vast intelligence asked again. "I will say this in words you will understand, alien," Celestia spat. "Death awaits you here. Your cells will burn and your intelligences die in agony, and I will be the fire that scours you from this universe. You see yourself a predator, when you are not but vermin. I will destroy you piece by piece, until there is nothing that will remain to mark your existence. You are the Empress," the voices chorused. "You are they who bind prey together, you claim the status of predator. We are eternal, and we will devour all who threaten us, as we have before. I am no mere predator. I am the light of 10 billion souls, the bane of those who claim themselves superior. You will die in agony, beast, and you will watch as my blade cleaves the last of your pathetic constructs in twain. We are eternal. We have always been, and we have always hungered. You resist. You will not survive. You will join us and become one with us. I would rather see 10,000 sons die than join you. I tire of this conversation." And with that Celestia recalled her soul, taking a deep breath as her senses drew back to reality. Humming of the ship drowned out the calls of the warp and the hive mind, the cool of the floor beneath her body returning slowly through her uniform. "Johnson is right that the hive mind would try and locate me," she thought. "They are not a direct threat, yet. Best to make sure they stay that way." She rose, smoothing out yet more wrinkles before moving back towards the table, keying a quick code into a nearby comm to display a map of the local sector. "Bridge. Empress," a voice called back. "Your orders." "Give me a scan of the hive mind's shadow." There was a pause as the space around Rynn's world faded to a deep purple, extending out several parsecs on the map. From here, Celestia could see the noticeable divots in the shadow, the last few warp lanes leading in and out of the subsector. They appeared stable, for now. The constructs she put up to support the lanes would hold for a bit longer, but it would take continuous focus to keep them completely open at all. Focus that would still be needed to direct the fleet. "We can move now to the second marker," she said. "I will be up momentarily to provide navigation and ward off the hive mind. Alert all vessels to prepare for warp transit." "At your command, Your Majesty." They had been on Rynn's world for almost 2 weeks. Tara had locked herself away in an apartment Mashes had requisitioned from one of the Renite nobility, surrounded day and night with charts and books as she planned the potential evacuation. Tara had dismissed her sisters so they might assist with the defenses of the city, Bianca having followed them to offer some assistance to the field hospitals assembled within the city. That left Mashes with the task of making sure the rest of the city was prepared for whatever might come. "You have never seen anything like it?" Mashes asked, steepling his hands as he stared down the foreman seated in front of them. Resting on the table between them was a crude drawing resembling a tyrannid ripper trying to eat its own tail. "No, my lord," the man said, shaking his head. "I've lived in the city my whole life, and I have never seen anything like that. But even one of your position could not have seen every part of the city, even one as small as this." Mashes leaned forward. "If you are confident that you have not seen this image, then that will be enough. However, I am performing an extensive examination of all of New Rynn City's defenses, and should I find evidence that you have misled me in some form, I cannot say that I will be very forgiving once we meet again." The man tried his best to put on an air of confidence, but Mashes could tell from his eyes he was a smart man. Smart men did not act defiant around inquisitors. I have never seen that image before, my lord, the man repeated, perhaps a bit less sure of himself. Mashas said nothing, regarding the man again for any new signs of doubt. More interrogation and perhaps some light torture could have gleaned more answers, but Mashas had no time for such measures, yet. Very well then, he said finally, taking the picture from the table and rising from his chair. You may go back to the bunker. Be advised, though, that I may call you back for further questioning. The man gave a respectful bow, stepping past Mashas and into the hallway. Nikolai and Alexis watched him go before the latter leaned in to speak with Mashas. A quiet one, my lord, he asked. Nervous as always, but I am pretty sure that one at least does not know anything. Mashas replied, pulling his coat back on as he stepped into the hallway. That being said, I would like to continue my investigation into the administratum once we return from the inspection. Send word for the next section of that list to be called up for interrogation. Won't that just add suspicion as to what you're doing? Nikolai asked. Yes, but perhaps suspicion might lead our enemies to make some mistakes. Mashas stopped, massaging his head for a moment before continuing. It's been a while since I've had a chance for this kind of work. Where's the nearest recaf station? Tara had makings for tea brought up to her room once she got settled. Alexis offered. It would also be good to see if she's ready for the next part of the defense. Indeed, he did not want to disturb Tara, but seeing as the two had not spoken for almost a week now. Mashas shook his head. The student's dealings were her own, and who was he to impede on the structuring of a great evacuation plan? Just an inquisitor who knows more about our enemy than he would like. The trio started down the hall, heading towards the lifts that led to the upper apartments. With most of the finery having been stripped away prior to the Tyranids' attack, there was not much to distract Mashas from keeping his vision forward. Ahead, he could see the lift guarded by a small squad of the Rinsguard, the PDF troopers staying at attention even with no one present to keep an eye on them. They kept their eyes forward as Mashas and the Valhallans stepped into the lift, not even flinching as the doors closed. When do you plan on questioning the PDF? Nikolai asked. In time, Mashas replied. Pulling aside the leaders of a successful defense might raise more questions than we need right now, but do not think I'll just ignore them. He paused. Perhaps Tara will be of some assistance, she does have an eye for observation. The Valhallans did not say anything more, keeping their eyes ahead as Mashas arrived at Tara's apartment. The room was an exercise in chaos. Tara was seated in the center, having shed her armor for white administratum robes and a tunic, surrounded by piles of books on a number of topics Mashas could not identify right away. A pile of crumpled-up papers gathered around her seat like scavengers flocking to a kill, a small pyramid having formed supported by, was that ash? Tara did not notice Mashas as he entered, instead giving an exaggerated groan as she crumpled up the latest document she had been working on, the Inquisitor blinking in surprise as she incinerated it with a burst of purple magic. That explains the ash. Is now a bad time, Tara? He asked. Tara did not look up to meet his eye. This is impossible, Mashas, she said, pulling another book out before continuing. I've run every possible scenario, did all the math and calculations, and I still end up with a 1% casualty rate among the evacuees, at minimum. Isn't that good, though? Alexis asked. Nothing about that sentence is good. Tara snapped, crushing her pencil to splinters as she stared down the Valhallan. Fortunately, Alexis had realized his mistake and backed away, Tara's anger subsiding. 1%. 300,000 men, women, children, dead because I couldn't find a better way. That is if we actually have to evacuate, Mashas offered, crossing to the tea set to start brewing. I do not want to be too optimistic, but the defense is going well and the Tyranids are being held at bay. For how long, though? Even with the Empress' help there's no guarantee that this will be enough. Tara buried her face in her hands, sighing deeply. If it were merely defending one city with a secure fallback position, that would be easy, but there is no secure fallback position with the Tyranids. We could cross an entire sector and there would still be no safe fallback position from the Tyranids. Welcome to my world, Tara. Mashas said, finishing off the tea before crossing to her. She gave a small nod of thanks as she accepted the cup, sipping gently while Mashes continued. As much as I know you hate the idea, you cannot save everyone from the horrors of war. No matter the battlefield, no matter the war, civilians will die. I know, Tara said, setting her tea aside. That doesn't mean I won't keep trying to help them. That doesn't mean I have to take 1% as acceptable. Greater inquisitors than I have tried the same, most of them went mad in the effort. There was a pause before Mashes gave Tara a smile. But then, none of them were the Empress student, perhaps you might be able to do something they couldn't. Thank you, Mashes, Tara said, giving a short smile before she turned back to her work. All this isn't going to go away, though. There's still so much left to do. All due respect, Tara, Alexis said from his position near the entrance to the room. If you keep working yourself like this, you won't have to worry about the Tyranids killing you. I am perfectly capable of managing my stress levels, Tara countered. Believe me, this is not the worst I've been at. Mashes felt a brief moment of intrigue, a chance to learn more about Tara's past, but the moment passed soon enough. I'm glad to see you are doing well despite the circumstances, he said, taking a sip from his tea. I cannot stay much longer, but perhaps after my inspection of the spaceport tomorrow we'll have more to discuss. Inspection? Tara asked, perking up. You didn't know I was inspecting the city's defenses? Mashes asked. I knew that. Tara replied. I just didn't know you were doing an inspection. I've been cooped up in here for so long I haven't gotten a chance to get out and actually see the spaceport myself. I asked General Hirsch, but he said not yet. Probably just waiting for the front to stabilize. Nikolai offered. Though you could have just used Imperial authority to override him. Alexis said. Lord Mashes doesn't use inquisitorial authority like that too often, but then we're always on the fringes where it doesn't matter much. Well, I didn't want to come off as rude, Tara mumbled, turning a fresh pencil in her hand a few times. I imagine he was merely concerned that you would have adequate security. Mashes said. Fortunately, Lord Hirsch seems to trust me, so you joining me on the inspection should give you all the clearance you'll need. Oh, that would be wonderful. Tara beamed before continuing. Maybe a closer look at the spaceport will let me eliminate that 1% casualty rate. Mashes clenched his jaw to avoid voicing his doubts in that regard, but another thought had crossed his mind. While you are there, you can also help me. Mashes reached into his pocket and pulled out the picture. I have been searching for any signs that the defense of New Rynn City has been compromised. Have you seen anything like this symbol since we arrived? Tara took the picture, turning it a few times as she examined it. There was a long pause before she shrugged and handed the picture back. It doesn't look like anything I've seen before, she said. But I'll be sure to keep an eye out once we do our inspection. Good, Mashes said, tucking the picture away. Given the nature of our enemy, I appreciate any help that may come. A force of Tyranids moved towards the mountains, overshadowed by a flying hive tyrant supported by a number of smaller winged creatures. They searched eagerly for prey, Gaunts and Rippers bounding forward in anticipation while a pair of Carnifexes lumbered in support. They moved heedless of any obstacle, alien eyes scanning the horizon for man or beast they could slay and devour. Unfortunately for them, none bothered to look up. Corax watched them from a nearby slope, unseen to all. Behind him were 10 Vanguard veterans, 5 of his sons supported by representatives from other chapters guarding the pass to the Arx Tyrannus. The minions of Cetus continued on, the hive tyrant swooping forward to keep some of the more unruly Gaunts under control. Strike the flyers before moving to the lesser creatures, he said, igniting his claws as he prepared to take flight. I will strike the tyrant. The leader of the Raven Guard squadron nodded, his own claws wreathed in lightning as Corax took off. He swooped down the side of the mountain, using only the slightest of blasts from his jump pack to keep himself aloft. The Tyranids had not yet noticed, but it would be only a matter of time before the Asteroutes were spotted. Time to make the most of their surprise. Corax fired his jump pack one more time before allowing gravity to do the rest, angling his boots so he was aimed squarely at the hive tyrant's back. The beast continued its slow loop over the rest of the Tyranids, growling as it searched for enemies to fight. As such, it had no time to react before Korax struck, his boots crunching through chitin as he crashed into the monster. Korax lunged forward as the tyrannid tumbled from the sky, his claws sinking deep into the back of the tyrant's neck. It gave one surprised howl before Korax pulled up, slicing the tyrant's head off in one clean strike. His target dead, Korax pushed off with a blast from his jump pack, watching as the corpse of the monster crashed into the unsuspecting gaunts beneath. Around him, the rest of the Asteroutes blasted through the tyrant's gargoyle escort, several of the creatures falling in small chunks as the Space Marines landed. Deprived of their main source of synaptic control, the tyrannids fell into a frenzy. Some of them threw themselves at the Raven Guard and allies, wildly sweeping at the Asteroutes while they replied with precise strikes. Others turned on each other, snarling as they mauled each other in an instinctive rush to kill and eat. The Carnifexes roared as they barreled through the horde, each swipe of their talons killing scores of lesser tyrannids while the Space Marines deftly jumped away. Korax landed just ahead of the swarm and charged, arms drawn back as he prepared to strike. The lesser tyrannids offered little resistance, ichor splattering across the Primarch's body as he carved through one after the other. The Carnifexes noticed, one of the nearer ones turning to face Korax while the other tried to overcome the Asteroutes as they pushed in for another attack. The beast lunged forward with its claws, but Korax dodged to the left before punching forward, burying his lightning claws in the Carnifex's skull. The monster howled and tried to break free, but Korax redoubled his effort before stabbing into the tyrannid's throat, green blood splashing down over his gauntlets as he tore its head free. With the fall of the Carnifexes, the rest of the tyrannids scattered. Some were brought down by short bursts of gunfire from the vanguard veterans, while others limped away to no doubt die from their wounds. Korax cast the Carnifex's head aside as he surveyed the battlefield, the Raven Guard sergeant walking up to him before speaking. "That makes the third such group we have broken up since yesterday, my lord," the sergeant said. "No doubt Cetus realizes the significance of the Arx Tyrannus," Korax mused. "Perhaps they intend for a larger trust to take the pass. Pass the word along to Master Navarez so his forces may prepare." "Yes, my lord," the sergeant broke away, most likely to get better range with his Vox caster. Korax took a moment to survey the terrain once more. The tyrannids had not yet caught on to his strikes from the mountains, but their increasing movement through the terrain would make staying secret a fleeting advantage. Soon, they would have to move out from the mountains and begin striking the swarm itself, perhaps draw off some of the pressure from New Ryn City. And perhaps allow Terra a chance to prove her mettle. A shifting of motion at the edge of Korax's vision drew him away from his thoughts. He turned, trying to spot the source, but found only rolling hills and peaks beyond. He moved forward, keeping his claws at the ready in the event some infiltrator attacked, but once more he could see nothing but the scenery. A lesser man would have passed it off as nothing. For Korax, that was only a warning sign. The air shifted again, Korax spinning as he watched a spectre drift before him. It was taller than a mortal, taller than even an Asteroutes, and a familiar face leered at him from the shadows before fading into the air again. "Lorgar." Korax breathed, rage welling up inside him for a brief moment before all was calm again. He swept his gaze across the valley once more, but found nothing that would indicate the traitor Primarch's presence. It was just him, his sons, and the fallen tyrannids. Nothing else remained. "My lord," the Raven Guard sergeant called, trotting over to Korax once more. "We have alerted Lord Navarez to the changes. Is something the matter?" "Perhaps," Korax said, calming his mind once more and pulling himself up straight. "Do you have the Vox frequency with the Arx Tyrannus?" "Yes, my lord. I am patching you through now." Korax nodded, waiting for the static to clear before the master of the Crimson Fists spoke. "Lord Korax," Navarez started. "I have heard that the tyrannids look to pushing on in this sector. It is a growing possibility." Korax said. "I have a few scouting parties moving ahead, they should have a full report of the enemy's actions by nightfall." Good, a pause. "We are well fortified here, but my fear turns to New Ryn City. I admire the salamanders and that young woman's desire to safeguard the future of Ryn's world, but I find that I doubt their ability to see that future through. I would not underestimate them, Navarez," Corax's eyes narrowed. As it is, I must depart from the fort for a few days. Why? The chapter master asked, clearly surprised. Is there some threat from the swarm that we have not noticed? I do not think it is the swarm, Corax said, looking towards the east at the distant shadow of New Ryn city. My fear is that darker forces are afoot here, and only now we are beginning to see their plans unfolding. As you say, my lord. Navarez replied. Will you require any additional forces? I may be able to spare a few asteroids to assist you in your journey. The squadron with me will be adequate, though those not of the Raven Guard will be sent back. Corax turned back to his men. I shall not be long, and will alert you upon my return. Of course, my lord, and with that the Vox winked out, Corax stepping towards the assembled vanguard veterans. My sons and I will be moving forward, he said. All the rest are to return to Arx Tyrannus to await further instruction. Relay among your commanding officers all you have seen here today. Yes, Lord Corax, the others chorused. As the asteroids busied themselves with last-minute preparations before crossing the mountains to the Crimson Fist's fortress, Corax and his sons made their way down the hill heading east, Corax keeping his eyes on the horizon for any further signs of danger. There were traitors on Ryn's world. That was something the Lord of the Raven Guard could not ignore.